Bible Answers with Dr. Al Garza.
All right, welcome back to Bible Answers. I am your host, Dr. Al Garza. Today I'm going to be giving you another update on the Hebrew manuscript study that I'm doing, and kind of let you know where I'm at, and starting with the Gospel of Matthew. Now, again, I want to make something clear here. I do have a number of Hebrew New Testament manuscripts that range from the Gospel of Matthew all the way to Revelation, which simply means that we now have every book of the New Testament written in Hebrew. Now, these are not coming from one Hebrew source text, but multiple Hebrew source texts, ranging from the 12th century all the way to the 17th, 18th century. So they vary on different copyists, different Jewish scribes, and they range in time frame. Now, there are a couple of fragments that I've mentioned before, a few pages that are undated. I haven't got a chance to confirm those as far as what exactly they contain, but they are listed, of course, as New Testament Christian writings in Hebrew, and they are, of course, the date is unknown. So I'm still trying to confirm what's in them because they're located in a few different libraries. And since really traveling is not an option right now because of the COVID, then pretty much I got to do everything through email and see if I can get someone to help me out. But the other manuscripts I do have in my possession, I've had to pay for some of these. I've had to copy these and search for them all over the different libraries. The ones that are cataloged, some of them that were in miscellaneous books that I had to go through to find single pages. So it's very time consuming, but I've made a lot of progress. And there are more Hebrew manuscripts of the Gospels and other parts of the New Testament that I haven't had a chance to look at yet, but they are cataloged. Some can only be viewed at the library, which of course I'm not able to do at this time, but hopefully soon I will be able to. But I have enough right now to composite what I do have and compare and start the project. Now, I started with Matthew. Now, the debate sometimes goes is that some people really do think that the Hebrew Testament was solely written in Greek and that was it, and that these are either not real copies or they're copies from Greek or they're a translation from Greek or Latin and so forth. Well, if you're someone who has not examined these texts and looked at them and compared them and did any kind of textual analysis, then really it's strictly your opinion, and to me, there's no weight to that. It's subjective. You need to look at these texts, compare them. You need to be very familiar with textual criticism, textual analysis, and putting this together. I have to count every Hebrew word. I have to look at every letter, compare the make sure there's the spelling, every line, how many lines going down. I mean, I'd have to do a serious word count, letter count on every verse, and see where the differences are, and as well as, how they all tie in together. But of course, there is no doubt in my mind that the New Testament existed in a Hebrew form during the time, that they were being written in the first century. And of course, they got translated into Greek. Yeshua, Jesus' mother tongue was Hebrew. That's what he would have spoken, taught to his disciples in that language. Matthew is understood as writing the first gospel, and he wrote it in Hebrew, according to a number of the early church fathers, as well as the evidence that we have now in these Hebrew texts. Now, I look at the first 23 verses of Matthew chapter 1. Actually, even if you go from further, the first 25 verses, and you can really tell that there's no way this could have been written originally in Greek, that it had to have a Hebrew source copy, in order to be written in other languages. And these Hebrew copies point to an earlier Hebrew source text. Now, that could be said easily because even if I'm looking at the first 18 verses or 17 verses, there's no way this could be written in any other language originally than Hebrew. Let me explain. The first opening, the record in most, depending on which Bible you read, and again, this goes back to translation. If you take out your English Bibles and you open up to Matthew chapter 1, and you just read any standard NASV or any other translation you want, it says some will read the record of the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Of course, it looks at the book of the genealogy. And that could kind of, give some, misinformation as far as how this was composited or why Matthew wrote that. What genealogy is he focusing? Why Jesus? If it only goes to Joseph, the husband of Mary, Jesus is not Joseph is not the biological father of Jesus, so there's no real bloodline here. So what would be the point of Luke writing a genealogy for Joseph, the husband, and Matthew as well, yet Jesus has no direct descendant record of himself through Mary, which would have been a bloodline, and yet just going through simply Joseph, the husband. Well, looking at the first verse in the Hebrew text, more literally would read, from the Hebrew, Sifar Todot HaMashiach Yeshua ben David ben Avraham. The Sifar Todot is the record, of course, the record or the written order of, and of course the second Todat is referring to the family history or the descendants of Yeshua the Messiah, Jesus the Messiah. So this is a written in order or written record of the family history and or the descendants of Jesus. Now this cannot be the Joseph line, the husband. This would have to be Mary's bloodline. And I'm going to explain why this proves that this was written in Hebrew in a specific way to show that this was the bloodline of Jesus. And of course, Luke is writing Joseph, her husband's genealogy, while Matthew is writing Mary's lineage through her father, Joseph. And this is proven in two separate Hebrew Matthew texts that I have. So this opening verse is literally saying that Matthew is writing the family history or the descendants of Yeshua, of Jesus, son of David, son of Abraham. Now that is clear. Now it goes through 14 generations, as everyone knows. And these 14 generations is specifically designated to the opening of Matthew 1:1, where it says, son of David. Son of David. Now think about this. If you know any Hebrew at all, this is why I'm saying this has to be written in Hebrew for this very reason. David is written with three Hebrew letters, okay, the Dalet, the Vav, and the Dalet. Now, numerically, if you add those letters up, you're going to find that it is totaling 14, okay, 14. So Dalet 4, Vav 6, and then 4 again. So it's 14. 14 generations, 3 letters to David in Hebrew, that total 14. That is only found in Hebrew, not in Aramaic, not in Greek or any other language. That hidden meaning of David and why Matthew's doing 14, 3 generations gives you the name David in Hebrew, David. Dalet Vav Dalet 14, 3 letters, 14 generations in this chapter, dealing with the descendants of the family history of Jesus. Now, if you believe that Matthew was writing to Joseph, Joseph's family history, and it's the husband of Mary, then you've only got 13 on the last, not 14. So it'd be 14, 14, and then 13. That would be a grave error and a grave mistake, and that would eliminate, again, Jesus as being the Messiah because he has no direct bloodline connecting him to David. And, of course, Matthew messed up with only 13. But, again, I have the manuscripts that show that two separate independent written manuscripts have Avi, Joseph, Yosef Avi Miriam, Joseph, the father of Mary, which you could find this also verified with Clement of Alexandria's writing, where he records, he actually states in his Stramata Book 1 that the genealogy goes, of course, from Abraham all the way down to Mary, the mother of the Lord, 14 generations, and he mentions that in the 3 times. So Clement of Alexandria, the first century, obviously had something that he was looking at, whether it was a Greek text or a Nova Hebrew source text, that actually confirmed the 14 going to Mary, not Joseph, the husband, but of her father. Now, again, this is important. This tells us what we should already know, is that Matthew is dealing with the genealogy through Mary, through her father, back to David, back to Abraham. So this ties easily why Matthew says, son of David, son of Abraham. He goes back, he starts off with David first because you're dealing with 14 generations 3 times, which is the name David in Hebrew, adding up to 14 with 3 Hebrew letters. This is not a coincidence. This is only found in Hebrew, and this is solid proof that Matthew wrote originally in Hebrew using this type of Jewish style of writing, using the letters and the letters of a name, total gematria form, and then of course completing it with the 14 generations. Of course, the other simpler one was one that we've all known that deals with the name Yeshua, that they would call his name Yeshua. And so with that, and we can look at that as well, because that's also another part of this, that when people fail to really understand that Matthew was writing in Hebrew, and that we see this just in the text. So you have to really study these texts. You can't just ignore them. So when we get to, the genealogy or the record of the descendants, this is where it comes in. And then we get to verse 21, and she will bring forth a son. You will call his name Yeshua, for he will save. What is that? He will Yoshia his people from his sins. This is a Hebrew word pun. Yeshua, Yoshia, only found in Hebrew again, not found in any other language, or Greek or Latin or Aramaic, no other language. This is a word pun here that points again to a Hebrew source text. Yeshua, Yoshia, which is common in Hebrew word puns. You have the genealogy of the family descendants of Yeshua, David, 14 generations, with David's name being repeated, with the 3 Hebrew letters of David's name adding up to 14, and of course 14, 14, 14. This should really settle a case that Matthew alone wrote in Hebrew, period. There is no other way around it. Now we can argue other areas of the Hebrew text on John, Matthew, or Mark, Luke, and the epistles and so forth, which again, I would say definitely there were Hebrew copies. These are breakthrough findings in these Hebrew New Testament writings and copies that we have. Even if you do say or believe that Greek was the original and these are just copies from Greek, why isn't anybody looking at these Hebrew texts? We have the complete New Testament in Hebrew now from different scribal sources, and none of them are being looked at. This is huge. We look at the Latin, we look at the German, we look at the Coptic and the Syriac and all the other languages in comparison to the Greek. Why are we not analyzing and looking at the Hebrew? What are we afraid of? What are we not wanting to see? This is huge. To me, this is every textual scholar's dream, is to find text. Because let me tell you something. The first argument against Hebrew New Testament manuscripts was they don't exist. Oh, they don't exist. They didn't survive. We don't have any. And now that we actually have them and found them, whether you believe they're going back to an original Hebrew source or they come from a Greek or Latin copy and translate into Hebrew, it doesn't matter. We now have them. And we should be able to look at them and textually compare them and look at them as compared to the Greek to fill in maybe some gaps that maybe the Jewish scribe knew about based on Jewish tradition, or, looking at the Masoretic text, which these copies follow. The Hebrew copies that I have follow the Masoretic text. They don't follow the Septuagint. So that should tell you something right there. When I'm looking at some of these messianic quotations that are used in Matthew and so forth, and he's quoting, and these copies quote Hebrews, the Old Testament, they're following the Masoretic text. They're not following a Septuagint for the ones that have been looking at. Now, it doesn't mean that all of them do that, or that we won't find any, Hebrew texts that come from a Greek. I know there are. I know there are Hebrew texts that do come from a Greek source, but even those we got to compare and use as a baseline to determine where these come from. And these are multiple Hebrew New Testament manuscripts we now have, and this is huge. This is a huge breakthrough that, I think a lot of people are not seriously considering or looking at. This is another witness to what we have in manuscripts, and nobody's really going after them. Very few scholars that I'm aware of, just a handful that are actually looking at them and doing something with them. But in a scholarly, worldly sense of the textual world of looking at manuscripts, it hasn't either dawned on them, or they're not aware of them yet, but they're here. We now have them, which now the first argument was always they don't exist. We don't have any existing. Now we do. And now some people want to move the goalpost even further. I've heard comments from people who say, okay, we have them, but they're not real. They're copies of this, or they're translations of this, and they're fakes or this and this. Again, pure ignorance. These are people who aren't even in the area of textual analysis or textual criticism. They've never looked at these texts. They don't know what's in them. They don't know how many we have. And yet they make some of the most ridiculous, ignorant comments that I've ever seen. So unless you've actually done some homework on this, please don't comment. So again, I'm working through Matthew. I finished chapter 1. I'll leave a link where you can actually download what I've done so far as a rough draft, just so you can kind of take a peek. Some changes might come along with them as I go through other manuscripts, but this is kind of gives you an idea of where we're at. But again, we know Matthew wrote in Hebrew. It was written that he wrote his gospel first before anybody else, and in his mother tongue, which was Hebrew. So I'm going to leave a link here. You can kind of look at what I've done. And again, I'll leave a link that you can see some of the Hebrew New Testament manuscripts that I found and I'm working through one of my websites. But there are more. I just haven't been able to get to them yet. They're now still being scanned. Some of them I can only view if I go to the library, which I can't at this time. But there are undated Hebrew New Testament manuscripts that there's no date to them, which means they could be one of the earliest Hebrew manuscripts that we have that I need to confirm. They can predate, the 9th, 8th century. It's very possible. So I hope this helps with the update of where I'm at. I hope, this has truly been a blessing to you. It's been a blessing to me to go through these texts and to see some of these things in there. Minor variants, of course, in some spellings and names, and whether they use the prefix "and" in the Hebrew or say "and" instead of just the name. So there are minor variants, just like you see in the Greek, but nothing that changes the gospel message. In fact, sometimes it amplifies it, like I just mentioned with Matthew chapter 1. The amplification of Jesus' family descendants, a record of order that goes to the name David in Hebrew that only can be seen here, that this was a Hebrew source text originally. So I hope this does help. I want to say thank you for all my people who have been supporting me financially and doing some monthly donations and have been buying some of my books and materials. I appreciate it. If you go to my website, Dr. Al Garza, you can buy some books or give a one-time donation or be a monthly partner in helping me do this. Again, I got to take time from my other businesses to do this. But the more support I get financially, the more I can put more time into this. So it is worth it. I think it'll be a tremendous blessing at the end to have a Hebrew New Testament Bible strictly from Hebrew New Testament manuscripts. But again, I want to thank you for all the support. Keep this in prayer, please. And if you have any questions or comments, you can leave them here or email me, and I'll be glad to respond. So thank you. God bless, and we will talk again soon.
Bible Answers with Dr. Al Garza.